Ever since Naoki Yoshida gave the tentative timeline of spring 2022 for the Final Fantasy XVI re-reveal, gamers around the world have been on tenterhooks. And as June came ever closer and Yoshida said the trailer was done, it became pretty clear that the re-reveal will be happening during one of the showcase centerpieces that will be appearing in place of the typical E3 period. When State of Play was then announced as happening on the 2nd of June, with a focus on third-party games no less, speculation started. And that speculation was amplified further when the State of Play was made part of the Summer Games Fest, which had Square Enix as a featured publisher. And this made sense, as the last time we saw Final Fantasy XVI was at the PlayStation 5 showcase. The Final Fantasy VII Remake had its big re-reveal in a State of Play ahead of E3 2019, and Intergrade was also announced during a State of Play. Now though, there's no need for speculation, as thanks to a brand new trailer entitled Dominance, we have received a ton of new information, some of which confirmed elements that have been speculated on for some time, but there was so much to digest, and it's raised plenty of new questions. With that in mind, we thought it would be wise to provide you with an extremely granular breakdown of the Dominance trailer and its surrounding information. So sit back and enjoy. With so much of this trailer focused around icons, the first area we're going to look at is going to be exploring every aspect introduced in this particular area, and that will relate to the specific characters themselves who were revealed to be the Dominants, as well as how their abilities will augment Clive in combat. The original trailer featured 3 specific characters: Clive Rosfield, Joshua Rosfield, and Jill Warwick, as well as 4 icons: Phoenix, Ifrit, Shiva, and Titan. But other characters and icons were shown and alluded to, they just weren't named, and it's for that reason that we're going to focus our attentions first on Benedikta Harman, the Dominant of Garuda. Benedikta had a small presence within the original trailer, but due to her outfit featuring feathers and her fingernails being orange, a colour associated with Garuda in a few previous iterations, it had been theorised that not only would Garuda appear in 16, but that this woman would be the Dominant. This has now been confirmed. As to the character herself, Benedikta is said to have endured a childhood filled with misery, something that forced her to become cold and callous, as well as a talented swordstress. But it also helped her to hone the dark arts of deceit. And by using these skills, forged through necessity, Benedikta has aligned herself with the kingdom of Waloed, a nation with ambitions of conquering Valisthea, having already subdued rival factions that existed on the Ash continent. As an icon, Garuda will take on a humanoid form with specific arms and legs and 4 talons instead of wings, and this design has been inspired by both Final Fantasy XI and 14. You can also see that this iteration will have 4 main wings, as well as 4 additional wings focused around the head, but there are some curious deviations. Both the 11 and 14 versions of Garuda had a softer colour palette, with dark hues focused around the extremes of each appendage. In Final Fantasy XVI, dark and light hues will be more blended, and that's thanks to the addition of some pretty serious armour plating that will appear across Garuda's entire body. We can also see that Garuda is wearing what appears to be a mask with jagged beast-like teeth. Now, we didn't get to see a specific move used by Garuda, but this move, used against Ifrit, does look like Aerial Blast, an ability often associated with the summon. In regular combat, Garuda's abilities will be associated with the wind element, as denoted by its green background colour. This will give Clive access to the Aero spell within its default Garuda moveset, but there were 3 other moves featured. The first was Deadly Embrace. This has only been seen before within Crisis Core, where it was associated with Death Claws. It would deal non-elemental damage, but would also inflict stop, and it's assumed, based on the history of the combat director, that this would function similar to Buster in Devil May Cry, used to bring enemies closer. The second move was Gouge, a melee move associated with Carbuncle in Final Fantasy XIV, but this was recently removed in Endwalker. The final move, Wicked Wheel, was used by Clive during the trailer, and it has a legacy association with the 14 version of Garuda. It's a dangerous move that appears as part of the Howling Eye trial, and it has followed Garuda through to guest appearances, such as in Brave Exvius. Next, we have Hugo Kupka, the Dominant for Titan. Starting out as a regular soldier within the Dalmacian army, everything changed once Hugo awakened as the Dominant of Titan. This initially led to more power and influence within the military, but it has since extended to politics and made Hugo a powerful man within the Republic. Based on a small lore dump, we know that Hugo will fall prey to the wiles of Benedikta, and if we're speculating, this would be the perfect way of undermining and weakening Dalmatia ahead of a planned invasion by the kingdom of Waloed. As an icon, Titan's design seems to be inspired by Final Fantasy XV. It will have a focus on minimal clothing and muscular body, traits also associated with earlier iterations of Titan, but the defining factor is that 15 was the only previous iteration that featured a bald Titan. Effort has also been placed around making Titans seem even bulkier, with what looks like armour and growths around its neck and hands. Again, we didn't see any named abilities associated with the icon, but we did get to see the quintessential punch and ground stomp used to destroy regular soldiers to great effect. When channeled, Titan will grant Clive access to stone, and we got to see 3 other abilities. Titanic Block is an ability never seen before in the franchise. It wasn't used either, but it would make sense if it was to block incoming damage and deal some kind of retaliation, and that may be what was happening during the Awakening trailer. Next is Upheaval, a recurring ability in recent iterations. It will be a swinging finisher move designed to deal significant damage on impact. This fulfills a similar function to Gladiolus' Maelstrom from 15, and is no doubt inspired by the weapon skill from 11, as well as the warrior ability from 14. What's odd, however, is that this move, outside of it making the Earth-based gravitation skill chain in 11, has never been associated with Titan, and it has only been associated with Earth when connected with the Dryad summon, as seen in Explorers and Dimensions 2. The third ability was Wind Up, which again is not associated with anything previous in the franchise, and as we didn't get to see it used, it's unclear what its application will be. Ifrit appeared within the original trailer and was given plenty of screen time again. What's curious, however, is that it did not appear within any of Clive's gameplay segments, only featuring during Eikon Battles. Based on wording, which could have been misdirection, and those Eikon Battle segments, it's implied that Clive can channel Ifrit, or at least the player will be able to. But perhaps that's what means Clive cannot wield its power within regular form. Either way, we did get to see Hellfire used. Phoenix was another of the icons that appeared within the original trailer, with Joshua Rosfield serving as its dominant, but both characters and the icon received limited screen time within this trailer. The design of Phoenix has remained much the same, but more emphasis has now been placed on highlighting the green hues, making it align more with the rainbow colouring often seen in the past. With Ifrit absent, Clive will be able to channel Phoenix's power, giving access to the Fire Elemental spell, and we also saw 3 other abilities. The first, Phoenix Shift, an original ability in terms of its name, appears to function similar to Warp Strike from 15, allowing Clive to close the distance to perform quick strikes. It could also act as a dodge or parry move. Rising Flames, another original ability, was seen within the original trailer. It will be used as a launcher, uppercutting enemies into the air. And the final ability, Scarlet Cyclone, again has no known association with the rest of the franchise, and it's difficult to assume its application as it wasn't used. The other icon who appeared within the original trailer was Shiva. We are still none the wiser about who Shiva's dominant will be, but we did get to see her use Diamond Dust in the fight against Liquid Flame. When channeled, Clive will gain access to the Blizzard Elemental spell as well as 3 known abilities. Cold Snap has appeared in numerous games, including Final Fantasy VII and Brave Exvius, and a variant called Cold Wave has been present in both 11 and 14. It will freeze enemies in place, allowing you to attack them without response. The other 2 abilities, Pile Drive and Thunderstorm, feel more aligned with Thunder, especially as they had purple colouring as opposed to blue, which is associated with Ramuh. Then again, during one of the cutscenes with Shiva, we do see sparks flying off the ice. Pile Drive seems original, but Thunderstorm often appears as a finisher for Thunder summons, such as Ramuh or Sildra, but it has been associated with ice once before in Final Fantasy IV, the After Years. Next, we have Odin. Based on their flag, it had been assumed that the dominant of Waloed would be Odin, and although that association has not been confirmed, the appearance of Odin has. Its design seems to be inspired by the summon's earliest iterations, most notably Final Fantasy VII, but it also draws from 14. This sees Odin sport a horned helm that features a clear fork, his trusty Zantetsuken sword that glows blue, but no shield, and Sleipnir has 6 legs as opposed to the 4 seen in 14. Although unnamed, we can also assume that Odin used Zantetsuken to disperse Bahamut's dangerous attack, And through Clive, we see that Odin will be aligned with the dark element, as we had predicted. Of the 3 additional abilities we saw, neither Arm of Darkness or Heaven's Cloud have appeared as traditional abilities before, although the latter was an equipable sword for Cloud in Final Fantasy VII. The third ability, however, is a classic, Gungnir. This has been a recurring ability associated with Odin since Final Fantasy V, and has sometimes replaced Sanbreque as the signature ability, dealing damage instead of inflicting instant death. Now throughout the trailer, Odin was often seen squaring off against Bahamut. We still don't know which kingdom Bahamut will be aligned with or who its dominant will be, but the conflict against Odin is intriguing as it plays into the speculation that Bahamut will be aligned with the Holy Empire of Sanbreque. As pointed out to me by Conjurewolf on Reddit, the colour of sanbreque is teal, the same colour aligned with Bahamut, and as shown by Rosaria aligning with red, the colour of the phoenix, this would position Bahamut as the holy elemental icon, something that, if we're getting thematic, would then explain why it's often seen fighting against Odin, the dark elemental icon. This iteration of Bahamut is also very intriguing, as it appears to be the first time in the history of the franchise that the venerable summon has no arms, and this would make it a wyvern as opposed to a dragon. Its colour theme is also very focused on being platinum with yellow hues as opposed to purple and blue. This further plays into the sanbreque association, as they have dragoons who have an affinity with wyverns, not dragons. The 8th known icon is Ramuh, who will appear as the quintessential wise man, complete with white hair and beard and a staff. Again though, it appears to draw from Final Fantasy XI and XIV, as Ramuh has a dark cloak, unlike many other iterations where it's light coloured. We do know that Clive will be able to channel Ramuh, but we don't know any of the abilities, unless those thought to be associated with Shiva were indeed Ramuh's. As had been revealed within a deleted tweet, the trailer also showed off a 9th unknown icon. This appeared in the trailer with a pretty gnarly yellow backgrounded portrait, and it appeared to be huge, which is all very curious. Titan also has a yellow background portrait, and there has been no other recurring elemental summon in the history of the franchise. Based on that, it could either be an odd throwback to hectatoncheir from Final Fantasy XIII, anima, or even ravana, which seems to be more plausible. But it could also be something completely new, and we'll have to wait and see on this one. This little detail does seem to work in with our theory though about there being 16 icons, as we've now seen 2 icons associated with the colour red, and 2 with the yellowy orange colour. In terms of random thoughts relating to icons, well first there's Dark Ifrit. At the end of the trailer, there appear to be 2 Ifrits squaring off against each other, and what's curious about this is that throughout the trailer, we probably are seeing 2 Ifrits, one that the player seems to control, and one called the Icon of Fire, who appears to be an antagonist. In the pre-release, there was mention of there being a dark icon, and that phrase has reappeared during some of the recent updated lore, as the Japanese description for Clive makes mention of him hunting down the Dark Ifrit in conjunction with Benedikta. As to what this means, who knows at this point. Another question that has cropped up relates to the colour of the icon's eyes. Dark Ifrit has an orange eye, whereas what we'll call Light Ifrit has a blue eye. Throughout the trailer, these 2 colours appear on a regular basis. Alongside Ifrit, Bahamut, Odin, Titan, Shiva and Ramuh are all shown to have blue eyes during cutscenes. When Benedikta and Hugo are channeling their icon, their eyes are also blue. But Bahamut is also shown with orange cat-like eyes, as is Garuda. Titan is then shown with something similar, and the one thing that these occurrences have in common is that they're all during boss encounters. And this perhaps speaks to the opening monologue about how the dominants have their essence worn away, and how using their powers breaks them until their immaculate aspect reveals itself. In terms of the wider cast, even though it's unconfirmed, we got to see who we now believe is Clive and Joshua's father, the Archduke of Rosaria, as well as the Holy Emperor of Sanbreque. We also got to see a few other NPCs from the original trailer, and a few new ones, but the spotlight was very much on the icons and the combat. So let's head there. At the moment, it looks like combat will have a primary focus around Clive, and the inspirations with Devil May Cry are pretty evident. As such, Final Fantasy XVI will feature real-time, action-orientated combat, and it looks as though many of the features seen within the Final Fantasy VII Remake, introduced to help modernise the ATB system and have it still retain a semblance of turn-based combat, have been removed or ignored. But that's not to say some things haven't been inherited. When looking at the basic setup, Clive will be able to perform standard melee attacks, a magical attack, and a special ability aligned with the icon that they have selected, as well as a jump. And even though there is no direct Q, we will assume that there's an evasion mechanic present too. Outside of this, L2 and R2 will be used to change the equipable icon and the abilities Clive can use. The assumption is that players will be able to bring up to 3 icon ability sets into each encounter, and they can be cycled through using L2. This will change the magic spell and unique ability present within the default setup, and R2 can then be used to replace the melee and magic attacks with stronger abilities that have cooldowns. It also appears as though certain moves will be situational, as, for example, Clive was unable to use wind-up while in the air, but it became available once Clive went back down to the ground. Based on this, it feels as though there will be a lot of depth to the combat, much like in Devil May Cry 5, with the player encouraged to switch between icons using the unique abilities to create lengthy combinations that will maximize damage. Yoshida has said that there will be a very deep character progression system layered over all of this, and this will likely relate to upgrading the relative strength of each icon as well as the individual moves that can be accessed, again similar to what was seen within Devil May Cry 5. To improve performance within battle, Clive will be able to then use tonics and potions mappable to the D-pad, and one of them has a curious name, High Potion, instead of the traditional High Potion. In the top left, we also got to see perks. None of them were ever lit up during the trailer, but it looks like they may be related to buffs that Clive can use, perhaps pulling from the classic food buffs from MMOs as well as 15. Then there's the meter that appears below Clive's health. This fills up whenever strikes land, and it could be similar to the Final Fantasy VII Remake, allowing Clive to perform enhanced abilities, or it could be a type of limit break, similar to 14. Alongside this setup, it looks like extra depth will be provided by mechanics such as the stagger system, which was introduced in 13 and then returned within the 7 Remake and recently Stranger of Paradise. We got to see this make an appearance during the fight against the stone jailer, with its stagger bar filling up as Clive dealt damage. Alongside this, another meter also appeared on the left-hand side of the screen containing the name of the icon selected, and dealing damage increased the meter at a rapid pace. It looks like bosses may also have a stagger meter, similar to Stranger of Paradise, as they have a yellow meter underneath their health bar. Performance within battles appears to also be graded, but not by letters. We got to see numerous actions called out related to damage dealing, ability use, and damage evasion, with a star system used to highlight how impressive each feat was. One of these was called Gambit Counter, a curious phrase given the connection some of the development staff have with Final Fantasy XII. Based on this, it's unclear whether 16 will feature instance encounters such as Devil May Cry 5, or whether everything will be much more fluid, with the stars going into some kind of wider performance pool. And then there's the Eikon Battles, or Kaiju Battles as they are affectionately being called. It's really unclear what's actually going on in many of these, but at one point Garuda does rip off Ifrit's arm. The damage output is also insane, and it's difficult to tell whether these will be quick-time events or reaction abilities, or whether there's something else in play. It's also hard to tell whether or not you will actually be controlling Clive in these sequences, or whether or not you'll be taking control of the dominants as extended party members. Throughout many of the normal encounters though, we got to see a few different enemies, including the Curl, a classic enemy that's been in pretty much every single major game in the franchise, and the Orcish Mesmerizer that's only been in one, Final Fantasy XI. Others, such as the Sigfrir, Falkstaff and Stone Jailer, appear to be brand new additions to the Final Fantasy canon. And given the diversity shown within just these few snippets, as well as what we've seen within the previous trailer, it highlights that Final Fantasy XVI will hopefully feature tasteful illusions as opposed to going too crazy. That then brings us on to our final topic of conversation relating to the game, staff. Within our previous video about 16, we did a pretty extensive breakdown of the known staff, pretty much confirmed staff and a few outliers. Well, the list of known staff has now grown much larger, as Hiroshi Minagawa, Kazutoyo Mayuhiro, Ryoto Suzuki, Kazuya Takahashi and Masayoshi Soken have all been confirmed. Minagawa will serve as art director, having forged a very close working relationship with Yoshida and Takai over the past decade and assisting with games like 12 and 14. Mayuhiro will serve as creative director, having also worked with Yoshida and Takai for many years. As predicted, it's also been revealed that Mayuhiro wrote the original screenplay. Suzuki will serve as combat director as predicted, with Takahashi taking up the role of main character designer and Soken taking up the role of composer. However, in the case of Takahashi and Soken, it's likely that they are just the figureheads, supported by an extensive list of artists, composers and arrangers, as this is what we've seen within the previous few mainline entries. The other thing we want to cover, outside of that random red dot next to the moon, is what's next. Many people, including plenty of Square Enix's investors apparently, were expecting Final Fantasy XVI to release within this fiscal year. And that's not too surprising really, given that Yoshida himself said that he wanted the game to be made available for people to purchase very soon after its re-reveal. However, as we now know, Final Fantasy XVI will not be releasing until summer 2023, which, if we're being realistic, means it probably will be releasing in September 2023. Square Enix has seldom released blockbuster games in July or August, with the only exceptions being mainline entries to the Dragon Quest franchise. Then again, Square Enix also doesn't really release games in September, but that's when they had planned to launch Final Fantasy XV, and it's a solid window for the Western market, as it's the end of the holidays and everyone is looking for a new piece of amazing entertainment. It means the next 12 months though are going to be very crucial. Based on the response from our community poll, the trailer received an 88% approval rating, but there are still so many questions that need to be answered before we start to gain a truer understanding about what kind of game 16 is actually going to be, and the development team will no doubt be trawling through comments to understand what people did and didn't like so far about what has been shown, including the UI. Either way, we hope that you've enjoyed this very granular breakdown. If you did, then please be sure to hit that like button and make sure you subscribe, as we have plenty of awesome content coming up, including, but not limited to, a Final Fantasy Tactics Facts video and an extensive look at the world of Ivalice. Alright everyone, with that, this is Daryl, signing out. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, the Livestream and Gregory, who are super special Onion Eye supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching the video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.